Senator Mezek, we've just come from the media briefing for the new redress scheme. Is this? It's all about money again, isn't it? What about justice for the survivors? You know, why has this all come down to money again?
I do think it is important that we do something to financially help people who were failed. So I don't think it's nothing. It is important, especially when there's therapeutic support and all sorts of things that haven't been offered previously that now will be offered. That's more than nothing. That's important. In terms of justice, one thing that will accompany this that didn't accompany the last one is actually a formal apology from the government for the way they were treated. We have to acknowledge the fact that there is just no excuse for the way these people were treated. It was morally wrong, legally wrong, and there's no point in hiding from that fact or using clever words to try and get out of that. So every person who claims under the scheme, I will be apologising directly to them for the way they were treated.
But the survivors and everything that I've spoken to don't just see it's the government that let them down, it was actually the law officers department that let them down by not taking, and we've got a case going on now of cases not getting brought to court by the law officers department. Now the law officers department are administering the redress scheme. I mean, that's just about as perverse as it gets, isn't it? I mean, they're not trusted. The latest social survey showed that 50% of the islanders don't trust the judiciary. So the very people who should have been prosecuting the abusers are now deciding what survivors get money and not. I mean, that's a little bit perverse, isn't it?
It's a really good question, and it's something that I pushed on when we were in the process of putting this together. So it's not the case that every single claim will be dealt with by the Law Officers Department. There will be an external facility to be used, and when I say external, I mean out of Jersey, by people who don't have any connections to Jersey as well.
Well, shouldn't that have been done in the first place? Why bring the Law Officers Department into it?
Well, because there are a substantial number of people who are already on the radar, who are already putting applications in, who are going through a very well-known lawyer who has been involved in this for a very long time, who are actually asking for that facility to be an option as well, because
survivors asked for the option to have the Law Officers Department to administer this redress scheme
through a particular lawyer who's been heavily involved in this, who we have been consulting with throughout this process, putting it together, said that actually that was an option that many of them were prepared or they wanted, partly for the simplicity of it, partly for the cost as well, because it makes it an easier scheme to manage. I was a bit surprised by that, as I'm sure you are, but that's why we've got essentially two options here. One that is completely independent for those that don't want to engage with the State of Jersey, absolutely none of whom I blame for that because of the way they were treated. But there are some who we are being told are okay with that, and so that option exists for both of them.
And just briefly, is what, you know, one of the biggest, every survivor, bar none, that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to many of them, have said, look, this isn't about money. We don't want money. We want justice. Wouldn't it be better to campaign for justice for the survivors rather than just bung them a few quid and get rid of them?
The justice side of it is incredibly important. As Minister for Children, I can't decide who gets prosecuted, so that's something that I struggle with, and I certainly do want people who have committed crimes in the past to face justice for it. It isn't right to say that, you know, bunging people a few quid is completely meaningless. There are some people whose lives will actually be drastically improved by getting some support in this form. That's an important thing to do, irrespective of everything else.
But I suppose on that front, then we've got to ask, well, how do you put a price on a ruined childhood and life? How do you put a price on that? I mean, you can't, but you have.
There are people who we can ignore and we can do nothing for them if we want. No money, no justice, no nothing. I think to have something, so an apology will be part of that. It may not be the prosecution, but you know, I'm not the chief prosecutor of the island. All I can do is apologise on behalf of the government for the way they were treated, to offer some financial support that hopefully they can use in whatever way they see as best for them, to help them move on with their lives if that's what is appropriate for them. But it also presents the opportunity to look at some of these cases again and internally hopefully learn from it and make sure that we can change processes that we may not be aware of that need to be changed in order that this sort of stuff doesn't happen in future.
Well, and finally, do you think the Law Officers Department and the Attorney General's Office, like the government has apologised to these survivors, do you think the Law Officers Department and the Attorney General's Office owe the survivors an apology as well?
That's a good question. For everything that every branch of the state has got wrong, they ought to apologise. I think that there's certainly a lot more that the Law Officers Department and the Crown Officers in particular could be doing to show that they've learned from this. There are some examples I can think of where people have spoken in a way that suggests to me that they haven't learned from it. I can't force anyone to do that though, it's down to them. But I hope people do learn from it, and I hope that people do apologise where not just them personally, but where their departments have made mistakes in the past.
Minister, thanks a lot.
Thanks.